Hearing nobody else.
I'm looking down the list for her.
Oh, do you have a list? Wait, participants.
If you click on participants, you'll
Oh
see.
yeah, I see. Never mind. I see Kathy, Bill, Bob Salnick, Brenda Ray.
Ed Edenbach is here, but I'm hiding behind Mary Lou Parry's name.
Hi, Ed.
Well, hi there. Mary,
Hi, Janine, Jen, Tom Bray, Judy. Nancy. Okay, cool.
Megan, are you going to be able to see all that long list? Right.
No, I'm gonna have to scroll a bit to be able to see all of it.
Okay.
Are we going to get started at 7 or are we going to wait till a few minutes after? What's the plan? I like to keep things on time.
Yeah, okay. How many
41 people are on at the moment.
okay. Is that including everyone from the township and the design team?
Yes, and
Okay.
RSVPs should be more like 60 something. So there are some people that are not on yet. That's RSVP'd, but they will be able to join
as we go.
Yeah.
Okay. I would say that we should get started out of respect for those who are on time. Not to denigrate anybody who's not on time, but
All right.
Get started.
Let's do that. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to this public visioning meeting for the Doylestown Township Community Center. We have a fun-filled 90 minutes prepared for all of you. We're excited that you've been able to take the time out of your schedules to join us. I'm Sylvia Hoffman. I'm an architect and partner at MKSD Architects from Allentown. My firm, along with Ballard King Associates, who is a recreation consulting firm specializing in recreation and sports feasibility studies, were selected by the township to perform a feasibility study and hopefully, ultimately, the design of a new community center for Doylestown Township. Tonight I have with us Ken Ballard. He's from Ballard King, and Ken has been leading the effort on the feasibility study. I also have the super organized and extremely meticulous Ryan Kennedy, who's a project manager and architect at our office, and Megan Henry with me as well, who is a project designer and will be working on the project going forward. We're excited to have all of you participate in this process with us. This public vision session will give us the information that we need to move forward, with the hope that the end result is a community center that will be an asset to all of you. Before we start that, I'd like Megan to go over some housekeeping details that will give you some direction on how you can participate in the meeting.
Thanks, Sylvia. Ryan, are you able to, oh, there goes the slide. So this meeting will be 90 minutes long, and please note we will be recording the presentation. During the meeting, you'll be participating in a series of polling questions through Zoom. You'll have 2 minutes to answer each of those questions. And after the question has been answered, we will share the results with everyone, and they will be anonymous. After each question, please use the raised hand or chat feature for any questions or comments you might have. And if you have any general questions or comments, there will be a period at the end of the presentation. And again, just utilize the raise hand or chat feature. So we'll take a moment just to review how to use those features. Since everyone is using a different platform, your screen may look a little different than the one on the presentation. There is a navigation bar along the bottom. If it goes away at all, you can hover over it with your mouse or tap your screen to bring it back. Please make sure you are on mute during the presentation. If you're prompted to speak during one of the Q&As, just remember to unmute yourself. The mute button is located on the bottom left and is also located in your participants panel. The chat box is located in the center of the navigation bar. So you can click on the chat icon and a box will come up, and that'll allow you to enter a question or comment. If you prefer to share your comments verbally, please use the raise hand feature. If you click the reactions icon, a little box will appear, which will allow you to click the raise hand feature. If you do not have a reactions or chat icon, you can select the participants icon, and this will give you access to the chat function as well as the raise hand function. But if you do not have the raise hand function still, you could also utilize thumbs up.
Thank you, Megan. I'll go over the agenda briefly. We went through our introductions. We're going to talk about the purpose of this feasibility study. Then I'm going to go over a timeline starting from the feasibility study through the completion of the project. Then we're going to need all of your help in the interactive poll. We'll have some time for question and comments, and then we'll discuss what the next steps will be. I'd like to introduce you now to Barbara Lyons, the chairman of the Doylestown Township Board of Supervisors.
Hi, thank you. Good evening, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight for this meeting of the Doylestown Township Park and Recreation Community Center. As you know, I'm Barbara Lyons, chairman of the board, and on behalf of my fellow board members, we welcome each and every one of you. By way of background, a park and recreation facility has been in our site since 1991 when we purchased Central Park. At that time, a Central Park master plan was devised that included a park facility, and that master plan was later encompassed in the 1992 Parks and Recreation Open Space Plan. If you've been around long enough, like I have, you may recall Oktoberfest festivals, which were created to showcase Central Park. And those festivals actually raised money and inspired us over the years to host other fundraising activities, such as our annual golf outing. And those funds that we raised have gone into parks, all of our parks, but most notably the amenities in Central Park, such as the pavilions, the Century Trail, the Some of Kids Castle, and most recently, the amphitheater. The comprehensive plans I mentioned are not wish lists of the Doylestown Township Board of Supervisors or the Township Administration. These plans embody the needs and interests of our community, of you, our residents. We recently concluded the 2020 Joint Park Recreation Open Space Plan, fondly called JPROS, which assesses the current needs and interests of our residents, our athletic leads, our community partners, and many other entities that participated in this study. And a recreation facility remains the #1 need. Prior to the construction of our new administration buildings, our recreation programs, you may know, were housed in what was called the Red Building, which is situated at the bottom of our driveway. The Red Building was repurposed with the construction of our new buildings, and the Parks and Recreation programs then moved into the double-wide trailers that are on site. And our Parks and Recreation programs will continue in the double-wide trailers until we build a new recreation building. It was shortly after we completed the new administration buildings that the board voted to proceed with the construction of a recreation facility. And after many months of assessment and discussion, the board voted in August of 2019 to construct the facility at the New Britain Access Road to Central Park. So now this leads me to the purpose of tonight's meeting. In 2020, we selected from numerous architects and consultants, MKSD architects and feasibility experts, Ballard King, and they're going to help us with the planning and eventual construction of a park and recreation community center. You've met our lead architect, Sylvia Hoffman, and next you will hear from Ken Ballard, our feasibility expert. So again, thank you for being here. I know we're all going to benefit from what we learned tonight. Ken, take it away.
Thank you, Barbara. This is Ken Ballard, and talk just briefly about what the tasks are that we're going to be completing as part of this feasibility study. And we're really kind of in the second bullet phase right now. The first is a market analysis, and that's understanding the demographics, not only of the township, but the potential area that would draw people to this facility, and understand what the demographic characteristics are, the presence of other providers in the marketplace, and how that may impact a possible new township facility. We've also spending quite a bit of time embarking on a public input process. Tonight being one key aspect of that is asking the community what their thoughts are regarding the project, but also we've been interviewing a number of different stakeholders in the project, special interest groups, others to gain input regarding their needs and expectations. We will take this information and then the design team will be working on determining what components are really the top priorities for this facility, and then understanding how that may develop then into a concept plan for the building and ultimately a site plan. We'll also certainly be looking at what the capital cost estimates are to build the facility, and also the operational requirements for maintaining and operating the facility moving forward. The map that's on the screen right now, if you look up kind of the upper left-hand corner, and there's a little icon up there, it says proposed recreation building site, and says G40, that's kind of in green there. That's the site that's been designated for the facility. That's one of the parking lots there that supports fields 4 and 5. That just represents the location. It does not represent the size of the building. It's just where in that particular area it might ultimately be sited. You can see then its relationship to the rest of Central Park as well. So those are the tasks that are in our study. And with that, we'll move forward to our next phase of our presentation. And that's Sylvia talking about the project timeline.
Thanks, Ken. So right now we're in phase 1 of the feasibility study. There's essentially this project timeline is divided into multiple phases. The first part being feasibility, and within feasibility, there's actually 3 smaller phases. So right now we're in the research and data collection time period, where we've been doing a lot of interviews with various groups, discussions with the township, and that's been taking place over the last 2 months. Today, we're at public meeting number 1, and the next step is that we hope to gather all of the information that we've gotten from all the various groups, as well as the residents who are here with us tonight, and some who may not be, and really look at the facility programming analysis. And as Ken mentioned, that is going to be the program for this building of the most important features that everyone's looking for, the most important elements. That's going to happen in March. We'll follow up with another meeting in March or April that will be a public meeting as well to update everyone on where things stand. And then we'll move into phase 3, which is the fun part for the architects, where we actually come up with some design concepts and floor plans and make those presentations, get some feedback, and continue in that process of developing the design. At that point, which we envision will happen sometimes in April, we'll need board authorization to proceed to the next phase. So this is actually the time when we decide if this is actually going to be a real project, if we see it becoming a building. And so that's going to lead into the design phase, which will produce the construction documents. Construction documents will take about 4 months to produce. And after that's completed, the project will be out to bid competitively to contractors. Once we receive the bids, they'll be approved through the township, and the board will approve those and will award them. And once the building permits are in place, we envision that the construction of a facility of this type is going to take approximately 1 year.
So that's kind of our introduction and kind of get you up to speed on where we are with the project. Now is when you all get involved in helping us a little bit and giving us some information on what you think is important about this project. So we're going to enter into what we call a polling period. And we have 5 questions we're going to be asking you. We'll do each of those individually. We'll stop, we'll look at the results, we'll get real-time responses to your questions. And then we'll kind of have a little time if you're on each question to kind of have a little bit of discussion with that. And ultimately, we'll be using, again, the raise hand or the chat options to get that input in there. And then once we get to the end of the 5 questions, then we'll open it up again to some more just general questions and responses. So with that, again, we want you all that are on the line right now to pay close attention, because we're going to start the question process here, and where you need to kind of key in a response to each of these questions that we're going to ask you. So go ahead, Megan. Okay. You'll see the box come up. If it's not as big as you want, again, if you go up to the right-hand corner, you can make it full screen if you'd like, or minimize it. So our first question is pretty general, and it's, where do you currently go for your indoor recreation needs? And you can, again, check each of the boxes that apply. So if you just take your cursor and you can check each one of those if you have that. So you'll see there to use private centers. Do you use other public community recreation centers, school facilities, YMCAs or JCCs, churches, college or university? Other, we'll give you an opportunity to discuss what that might be if anybody marks that. And then the last one is, if you don't utilize indoor recreation facilities at all, check that box. So with that, go ahead and again, move your cursor over each of those little response areas, and you can click in those responses and then hit submit at the bottom, and that should give you, make sure your information is being tallied. So with that, everybody go ahead and start marking your responses to question 1.
Last 10 seconds.
How's our tally looking?
Says 40 out of 44 voted.
Okay, so your last 4, let's get those in here. We'll be closing it up here in a second.
That could be us or something, so I guess I should close it now.
Okay,
Okay,
all righty.
and sharing results.
Okay, so here's what you said. It's pretty close between utilization of private fitness centers and utilization of YMCAs. So those are almost a dead heat there. And then you see other, and we'll talk about that here in just a second, school facilities. And then we're looking also at a lot of do not use indoor recreation facilities, a little bit on churches and colleges. So some of you who marked other, raise your hands, or again, put in the chat your responses to what other meant. And I saw a few things coming in that kind of indicated that some people were exercising in their homes. I can certainly understand that, especially with COVID going on in the last year plus. So we should mention, and should have at the beginning of this, it's the last year has been unique. So this was really, these responses are based on kind of pre-COVID or post-COVID, not where we sit right now, because it obviously is a unique time. So any other responses to what the other meant in terms of other options that maybe we didn't have listed here? Nothing? Okay.
We're getting a lot of responses on the chat that a lot of folks are working out at home currently.
Okay, and that's, again, we would expect that, especially with COVID being the case, and probably some people work out at home even if there wasn't COVID going on, but we certainly understand that's kind of a unique feature right now with a lot of the facilities being closed or having limited availability at best. So That's understood. So I think any other responses, and if not, we'll move on to our next question.
Someone mentioned the tennis club.
Okay, Doylestown Tennis Club. All right, well, let's move on to question 2 and see what we have coming up here. All right, so the question really is, how would a community center most benefit the Doylestown community from your perspective? Please indicate, again, all that apply. And again, this would be providing a place for parks and recreation programs. Barbara mentioned some of the dilemma that's gone on right now and being in the trailers. Township meetings or other types of events and activities, community special events, rentals, again, to the general community for different needs and expectations, and again, the other categories. So again, mark each and every one of those that you think is appropriate, that represents how you feel the community would most benefit from a new community center.
Fifteen more seconds. We're at 38 people responding, so would you like me to stop it, Ken?
Let's just wait a minute more. Anybody else that we didn't have as many people answer the second question as the first. So let's give you, again, maybe 10 seconds real quickly, see if we can get back up to, what did we have last time? 44?
At 40.
40, okay. Why don't we go ahead and close it up then, and let's see what we get. All right, so again, the top response was parks and recreation programs, which certainly they need a home based on what we know of the current situation. Second out of that was community or special events. The third was for rentals. The fourth being township meetings, and then the fifth being other. And again, talk to us, those who checked other, what that means. I noticed coming in on some of the chat was a need to be able to support emergency services. And that's a good point. And we've heard that a lot during our public input process up to this point, as well as our interviews with some staff and board of supervisors. And that's definitely, I think, a concern we're going to try to address through this process. What other kinds of comments do we have, Megan?
The emergency service one came up a couple times. Someone mentioned COVID vaccines as well.
Yep.
Using existing commercial sites for community use as an option, and a place for teenagers to gather.
Okay, good. Are there any other questions, any other people with their hands raised that would like to verbally say anything regarding what other or any other responses to this question?
Jim just messaged into the chat a good question. What type of rentals, and will there be a kitchen?
Well, we're going to get to that here in a minute on the question of a kitchen or not. The rentals could be a lot of different things. They could be rentals for, and obviously it's going to depend upon the type of spaces we end up with in the building, but rentals to groups and organizations is possible. Certainly rentals potentially to township residents to have some types of family functions could be there. So it could be a variety of different types of rentals for different groups and organizations as well as individuals, but that's going to really be dependent, again, upon what amenities we end up with in the facility. So that may be a good segue to our next question, where we're going to talk now about what you see as the priorities of the types of spaces to include in this facility. And before we do that, I want to kind of talk about the options that you're going to see presented in the next polling question, and we'll talk about the spaces and how they potentially could be utilized. So one of the options that you'll see is for a gymnasium space. And we kind of typically think of gymnasiums oftentimes with the center picture of being able to play basketball, maybe volleyball, but the reality is gymnasiums in this day and age are definitely multi-purpose space. Certainly they support sports, but they also support up and coming sports such as pickleball. And also other types of maybe non-traditional types of classes and programs. Some of them may be somewhat fitness-based down the lower left-hand corner, and also the opportunity to use it as a congregate space. You see in the right-hand corner where you may have either special events working out of there, could have presentations, a multitude of things that aren't necessarily have an athletic orientation. So it's a big space, usually just to accommodate the more traditional activities. So it can also be a good locale to have large group gatherings and other types of events that can take place there. So it's not, when we think of gymnasium and the option that's on there that you'll see, don't think just totally about the traditional gymnasium uses, but realize that there's a lot of opportunities to use that space for other things. Another option you'll see, which somewhat relates to the previous question on rentals, is meeting rooms. And again, the obvious thing on a meeting room, it could be used for meetings. Like some of the images you see to the right, whether they're around tables, whether they're informal, or whether they're any other type of event or activity that requires that kind of a setup. And again, could be also utilized for rentals. But these spaces can also be used for recreation programs and services, whether they're things that are run by Doylestown Township, Parks and Recreation, or other providers that may be bringing activities to this facility as well. So again, it's really multi-purpose space, but again, it's more passive type uses that traditionally take place in these spaces. But again, can serve a lot of different types of needs with that. Oftentimes, as part of a facility of this nature, and oftentimes to support the meeting room spaces, and again, depending upon how the gymnasium is utilized, you'll oftentimes see a kitchen. Kitchens can be different sizes and different types of orientations and used differently. You can have traditional kitchens that are up more in the right-hand corner that are used to prepare or warm up meals. Oftentimes what we'll call a catering kitchen, where pre-prepared meals are brought in and warmed up. Other times they may be also supporting classes. And so they're in the lower left-hand corner. This is a public recreation center where they have a kids cooking class taking place there, and also adult cooking classes that go on. So it can also be, besides just supporting events and activities, it can also be a recreational program space. And we've seen a real increase here in the last 5 years in just the interest in healthy cooking as it relates to adults, and also just cooking activities for youth in general. So a kitchen can have a lot of different uses, and the design of that and the size of that depends upon it. Another option that's being considered in there is an indoor track. And most often tracks are elevated above a space. It can be elevated again above fitness areas. Most often it's usually elevated around a gymnasium space because it's already kind of a two-story space to begin with just the size of the gymnasium. So an indoor track could possibly be considered. Its size is dictated by some of the other amenities that are included in the facility. Ultimately, it usually has 2 to 3 lanes, if you will, to walk, and jog. This is not in most all cases, is not a competitive track. It's a walking, jogging track for just simply a place for people to do what they would do normally outside when it's inclement weather or it's just dark, either early in the morning or later in the evenings. Okay. Group exercise space, as the name implies, it's a room that can be used for group exercise, which can be a variety of different types of classes. On the lower right side is more the traditional kind of aerobics type programs. It can be up in the upper right-hand side of the picture where it's really group cycling, oftentimes called spinning classes. Certainly on the lower left-hand side, you see a little lower level class. It's kind of a movement type program, oftentimes focusing on seniors. And then the other thing is, even though it's called oftentimes group exercise space, it can be utilized for a lot of dance classes, youth programming, martial arts, a lot of other things that utilize a very similar space. So it's, again, has capabilities beyond just the traditional fitness type programming that we may see. So again, it has some multi-use aspects to it. All right. Fitness, or oftentimes that means weight cardio equipment spaces. The size and configuration of that varies pretty dramatically. And the relationship or ratio between what's available for cardio equipment or weight equipment, whether it's machine weights or even potentially free weights, is really dependent upon the situation, the size of the facility, and the needs of the community. Again, the uses are pretty straightforward here. It's really fitness-based, doesn't have a lot of multi-use capabilities. It's really fitness in this particular case, but it can be laid out and configured in a number of different ways. Teen area. When we say teen area, that can really be defined a lot of different ways. It could be game rooms, as you see down the lower left-hand corner, or up in the upper right-hand corner. It can also be presentation or music spaces. So it can be a place for small bands or other types of presentation. It can also be video production areas or audio production areas. So when we say teen area, it really has a real broad range of possibilities. And it's one of the things that when we want to work with the teens to define what it is they want to do in that space, but a lot of different things can be programmed into a teen area depending upon the needs of the community. Senior area, again, that can mean a lot of different things. It usually can involve some types of social activities or social functions. Sometimes you can be using some of the meeting space for that as well. I think one of the things when most of the centers, whether it's a teen area or a senior area, the expectation is that they're also utilizing other spaces in the building beyond areas that have been designated maybe for their specific areas of use. So it's not just limited to if you had a senior area saying, well, that's where all the senior programs would take place. The expectation is during times of the day, senior programming may be in multiple areas of the building. And same thing with teens when they're available in the afternoons and evenings and on the weekends as well. So it kind of represents giving those groups a potential home for their, in a place kind of they can call their own and can start from. So those are the spaces that we're going to have as options in this next question. And we wanted you to be able to kind of understand the vision for how those spaces would be utilized and kind of use that as a background in your responses to this next question. So let's go ahead and bring that one up. All right, so what specific components do you believe should be included in your community center? And again, please indicate all that apply. We have that gymnasium options that we talked about, meeting rooms, kitchen, indoor track, again, group exercise room, the weight cardio area, teen area, senior space. And again, we have the other, which we can define once you put that in there. And then if you don't think this is really necessary, none of the above. So why don't you go ahead, key in your responses to this, and let's see what we end up with.
15 more seconds. Ken, we're at 36 responses. Do you want to give some more time?
Just go another 10 seconds and then we'll close it out.
Okay.
Again, we encourage everybody that's on this visual or virtual meeting to respond to the questions. Again, it's very important to us in our planning process. So please take the time and make your wishes known.
Okay to close?
Let's do it. All right, so what did we end up with? Well, pretty much almost a dead heat again between gymnasium space and meeting rooms. Certainly those are the top two vote getters, followed by a kitchen, which again, oftentimes goes certainly with the meeting rooms, if not even the gymnasium space. We also see a very close number, if not almost identical, for teen area. So those are kind of the top four. Then we see a senior space, not too far below that. And then we see indoor track, group exercise room, pretty small response for weight cardio, others, some response, and then some that noted that they don't think any of these spaces are needed in there. So let's again, for those folks who had other, what were some of the responses that we had that identified what other spaces they would like to see that maybe we didn't have in our choices?
Some of the others that came up were an indoor area for summer camp programming.
And that, yep.
Another suggestion was just a large program space for dog training, ballroom dancing, etc.
Okay. Hopefully we could potentially take care of that either from some of the meeting room space, and oftentimes some of the meeting room space could be divisible. It may be able to utilize the gymnasium space for some of those activities as well. Anything else, Megan, on our chat responses?
There were some comments related to understanding what spaces already exist within the township, such as at Del Val University, at the Y, or existing gym spaces. And also concern over the development of Central Park and the natural space in the area, preserving the natural space.
Okay. Well, part of our, again, our task that we've been looking at, and I mentioned at the beginning, is doing a market analysis, and that's understanding what's currently available in the marketplace. And we've been working on that here for about the last month and identifying what's out there and available. And there's certainly a number of different types of spaces available, whether they're from the nonprofit sector like the YMCA, or whether they're for-profit businesses or others. So we're benchmarking those. We know what's going to be available for spaces. We've also been asking in some of our other input sessions where particular needs are, that even if there's the presence of other providers, maybe there's not adequate space within that. As an example, we've been hearing a lot about the need for additional gymnasium space, even though schools have gyms and some of the other providers do as well, but that there's just a general lack of gym space. That's just one of the kind of themes that we've heard in there, but that's a good point, and one of the things that we're working on through this feasibility study as well. Okay. Let's move on to our next question, number 4. So now we're interested is if the facility had the amenities that your household would use, you or your household would use, how often would you use this facility? Several times a week, once a week, several times a month, once a month, or never? And really, we're looking for just one response. So just choose the one that's more applicable to how you'd see potentially utilizing this space if it had the amenities that you were indicated in the previous question. So let's go ahead. This one should be pretty straightforward. So go ahead and start keying in your response on that. Again, on your response, this is post-COVID. We know right now that different world, and we're hoping this will be ending at some point here before we ever get this facility built. So again, not thinking about the last year during COVID, but if that's gone, how often would you utilize this facility?
Fifteen more seconds.
Okay.
We are at 38, which is what we've got on the last response.
Okay, so once we get to the end of our 2 minutes, let's go ahead and close it out.
Okay.
All right, so that's kind of a big spread in there. We've got the number one responses being either several times a week or once a month. So that's kind of at both extremes. A number of people that said never, and some that said, again, once a week or maybe several times a month. I'm curious, for those who said you would never use it, what was your thinking on that? Was it because you simply don't utilize these kinds of facilities? You don't think it would have the amenities that you care about? A little bit, either, again, you can raise your hand and verbally respond to this, or again, you can type it in the chat box, some of the reasons that you may have checked never to use the facility.
We had a comment that there are other facilities that offer some of these services.
Okay.
And also commented that how often they would use it would depend on what classes were offered there.
Absolutely, and that'll be a key aspect of this. What opportunities that you have beyond just the space that are being provided. So good point. Okay, there's quite a big swing on that, and so all right, that's interesting. Let's go ahead then move to our last question, and this is a little bit more of a broad-based response that we're looking at here, and it's really, what priority should the township place on the development of your community center to serve your needs? From your perspective, is this a very high priority for the township, a high, a medium, or a low priority? So again, we're looking for one single response to this. Go ahead and key that in terms of what priority this should be for the township.
15 seconds.
Okay.
Ken, we're at 37 responses this time.
Okay. Well, we've been averaging 38, so why don't we go ahead and close it out? Ah, interesting. So kind of spread between there, but the highest number being low priority. So, I'd be interested if somebody wants to key in on this, but in a minute here, we're also going to open this up to just more general questions and answers. So if people want to wait even to respond or the reason why they have it marked as low priority, or even other ones that have it marked as high or very high, we'd be interested in knowing why that is. But we thank you for taking the time to answer these questions. Again, hopefully you found them of value. We will certainly find them of value in terms of moving forward with the process. With that, we will close out the polling aspect of this presentation. And now we're really done presenting any kind of information. We really want to just open this up for any general questions, comments, answer any kinds of questions that may be raised. And again, everybody's been responding using the chat feature, which is fine, but we certainly have to you available to speak verbally on screen, and you can ask your questions that way as well. And so however you'd feel most comfortable, we're happy to now take your questions or comments. Again, if you want to speak verbally, just use the raise hand function, and Megan will call on you.
I got a hand raise from, is it Janine Mitchell?
Yes, it's Janine Mitchell. Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question about the public, the value of a public response period. I think our township might have about somewhere around 16,000 residents, and we have 38 people responding to these questions, which are really important for such a large project. I wonder, in your experience, is this typical? And is this, would you consider this an adequate polling of township residents?
Well, I think it's important to remember this is just one of many tools that we're using to gain public input. So this is not the only thing. And so what we want to do this evening, and this was not certainly a non-scientific way to do that, was just giving you some opportunities to kind of interact with our presentation. But again, we are taking all the different aspects of input. Again, we'll have another community meeting coming up in late March or April, as well as another opportunity to give input. But it's all the different methods that we're utilizing for input through this process will all be utilized to kind of give direction to the project. And we've heard a lot of different types of input, not just what we heard tonight, and a lot of varying things that people wanted to see and concerns or issues with the project. So just one of many tools that we're utilizing in this process. Other thoughts, other questions that people may have?
Jim also raised his hand.
Okay,
Hi there. Can you hear me?
we can.
Yeah. Hi there. Yeah. Thanks for moderating. Jim Baldessari here. So, one of my particular concerns is maintaining the the aesthetic and the ecology of the park, and I think others have expressed similar views there. One of the things we could think about, though, is that I know the township is very committed to environmental issues and to sustainability, and we've passed a resolution, looking at Ready for 100, which talks about going to renewable energy. So one of the things that the EAC talked about, and I certainly support, would be that if we did build such a building, that it could really be a model for sustainable building. It could be an educational center. It could be a showpiece for what individuals could do in their own homes in terms of minimizing impact on the land, minimizing energy usage and waste, native plants, and all the things that that we've talked to the Board of Supervisors about quite a bit. So although I have some reservations about the building, I could definitely see the benefits of building a building that served, not just the recreation function, but also an education function related to environmental issues. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Well, thank you, Jim. That's a real good point. And we're increasingly on these types of facilities seeing that is not only obviously the desire for an energy efficient facility, but also the educational aspect of that as being part of it. So that's a very good point, and one we may be able to take advantage of, depending upon how the project moves forward. But yeah, I mean, that's a big part of this, and we have certainly started to see that be a bigger issue. Haverford Township and their facility did some of that a number of years ago when that first opened, and so they have some educational aspects with some of the unique energy saving ideas that they utilized. And certainly things have changed even since the time that facility was built in terms of some of the energy efficiency factors that are available now. So good point.
I had Brian up next, and then there were a few questions and comments in the chat I can go through after Brian speaks.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Brian Loftus, thank you all for the presentation. I guess my question is, has there been any consideration to building this center at a different site? Central Park is beautiful, and the aesthetic is something that we value very much. Has there been given any thought to a different site within the township?
Well, I'll let some members of the township respond to that. We were, as the project team, were given this site as being the location for the center. With that being said, there was also a process that the township went through to get to the recommendation for this being the preferred site. I can't speak to the background of how that was all done, but it wasn't just a knee-jerk decision to utilize that space. There was a process that came about. I don't know if anybody from the township wants to, Barbara, or anybody else wants to respond further to that question or not.
I'll give a stab at this. Thanks for the question. We don't really have a larger plot of land where a facility could be housed. We have very small parks. You might be thinking of the Turk parks, but we don't own that land. The county does, and we rent it, and we're under a lease. So the only place that we could put such a facility is in Central Park, and we discussed the location in Central Park, through a number of meetings. So that's how we ended up with the New Britain access point. Stephanie, if you want to chime in here, I'd appreciate it, but that's why we're limited. We don't have any other location that could house this kind of facility.
No, Barbara, you, I think, hit the nail on the head there. We had volunteers involved from other committees in the township that assisted in evaluations along with consultants. And this was the site that the Board of Supervisors selected in the summer of 2019.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, any other verbal questions that people have that they would like to express?
I see that one other hand just popped up. I'm not sure what your first name is though, but there you go.
I'm assuming that's me.
Yeah.
This is Joe Gunzarowski. I attended, first of all, thanks for hosting this again tonight. I attended one of these meetings at the township building, I believe it was last year prior to COVID. And I guess the question that I still have is, because this is going to cost an awful lot of money, what's the ongoing cost really going to be to the community, potential cost to build, and then most importantly, are we taking away from our tax-paying businesses that have been supportive, have opened up businesses in our community whether they be, I'm not going to name the names, but whatever they are we taking away from them with this facility? So I guess the real question is, I think there's a need that we need some community space of some sort. But unfortunately, during COVID, I have walked the park an awful lot. And I've never seen a soul at any of those game checkerboards ever. And I've walked that park almost every day for the last year. And you would think even in the height of summer when COVID was, everybody wanted to be outside. So do we really need this facility? Because we see other townships have them. And I'm wondering about the use that they're getting and the cost that goes along with that. That's my 2 cents.
Okay, Jim, well, that's a good question. And one of the things that we'll be doing through this process is identifying, once we get this defined a little more about what this building could contain, we're going to be able to tell you what the cost is going to be to build this facility, also what the cost is going to be to maintain it and operate it. And we'll also get a sense of what kinds of programs and services can be offered there. Again, one of the key things we saw, even in the response to the questions that we posed tonight, was the fact that overwhelmingly people said that they thought one of the more important aspects of any new facility was to service the needs for existing parks and recreation programs. And I think one of the real drivers in this effort from the township's perspective to get a facility built was really to provide a location, which they lost in their other previous buildings, giving a home for parks and recreation to provide a variety of services that, quite frankly, are not, COVID aside, are not at the level they were when they had the building previously. So I think first and foremost, it's to provide opportunities for parks and recreation programs to take place as they were before. And that space was lost when the building was renovated and changed. Certainly, we are sensitive and we know not wanting to necessarily compete with existing businesses. That's why we're asking some of those questions and appreciate your response on that. But a lot of, I think, your questions will become clear as we go through this process in the next couple of months, and we'll be able to identify those questions. And those are, quite frankly, the same questions that the Board of Supervisors have as well, and they're wanting having those answered also. So we're going to be providing, that's part of our job as the project team, to provide that information, not only you all as the residents, but also the elected officials as well.
We did have an additional hand raised by Dr. Griffin.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, thanks.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of agree with the environmental aspects of putting up another building in Central Park. The green spaces, if anybody's taken a look, they've seen how sorely stressed Neshaminy Creek is, the Harts Woods. I really am not, I'm concerned about how much more our natural environment can take of us continuing to put up building after building, when it seems to me the architects and the people ought to be using their ingenuity and their resources to reconfigure and utilize existing developed properties and make those fully occupied and beneficial to the community, where there's already parking, there's already sewage, there's already electrical, there's already a building there, and leave that beautiful open view that only exists in Central Park. It once it's gone, and it's very precious.
Okay.
Thank you.
Not a problem. So concern of loss of open space and kind of any environmental impact on that. All right, other questions that may be out there. Megan, do we have any more raised hands, or are we going to talk a little bit about some of the chat responses you've gotten?
At the moment, there are no raised hands, so I've been keeping track of a couple common comments and questions that were popping up. So one of the first ones that someone asked a bit ago is, will there be a fee for residents or non-residents to utilize this facility?
I think, again, not knowing what's in the building yet, it makes that a little bit tougher questions, but certainly for activities that would take place there, if those are activities that command a fee for them now or would be in the future, there will be fees assessed for those programs that would take place there. Obviously, if you were renting the space for any type of function, there would be a fee associated with that. If it had more active elements like some of the fitness equipment, the expectation would be there would be a fee for use of that as well. So yeah, there would be fees, but again, most public facilities have a variety of different fee options where you either pay by the class or program that you're taking, or you pay, again, on a daily rate potentially to use the building, or some type of a longer use option, such as a year pass, that type of thing. But that'll depend upon the amenities that are in the space itself. If none of the real active elements, such as the fitness amenities, are located there, then it would really be paying for the programs and services that would take place there, just like you would on any other aspect of programming that would take place, a recreation program that would take place through the township, and for rentals. So it'd be along similar lines to what you've been doing in the past, and similar to what other public facilities are available in the area.
Thanks. And I did see that Anne just raised her hand, but before we get to her, just a few general comments that were floating around is that there's a push for more outdoor activity space to be developed, particularly the trails or a skateboard park. And there's also interest in indoor court space, potentially for sports leagues. And also collaboration with other organizations such as Del Val for athletic facilities.
Right, and again, I think one of the opportunities on one side of this is to also locate a building where it can, in a sense, enhance some of the opportunities to get people involved with outdoor activities. So it's linkage to the Central Park, it's linkage to other trails and other things, trying to oftentimes enhance some of the opportunities to be outdoors as well. It also provides a physical location, I think somebody brought up earlier, for things like summer camps and other types of programming that have to have some options for indoor space for inclement weather or other types of things that occur. But even though a lot of those activities will oftentimes be outdoors. So it can also be kind of an opportunity to enhance some of those outdoor activities and provide a place when that's just simply not possible due to weather and other concerns. Certainly we're looking at not only the opportunities that are present from a possible partnering with other organizations. So we've tried to look at that, whether it's programs and services that might be presented in the facility. Well, it's something beyond that to maybe actually partner on the facility as well. So that's part of also our process that we're working through right now. And we've already had some conversations with potential partners already through this process. So that is part of our work that's taking place at this time as well.
Great. So we did have 2 hand raises. So we first have Anne and then Dan.
Okay.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. I am concerned about the size of the building. You have not discussed a square footage, and I know you're going to say, "Oh, we don't have all the details of how it's going to be." But the pictures that you presented with the indoor track, with the fitness center, with meeting rooms, with the basketball court, that's a very sizable building. And I noticed in a comment that one person, and I'm not picking on you, but one person said this will be tucked into a corner of the parking lot. That is not going to be true, is it? I mean, this is a large building.
I don't think the vision, quite honestly, is for a large building. If you incorporated every single thing that I showed you, that could be a sizable building. I don't know that we're seeing the idea or even moving forward of doing everything that you saw, even in the options that were presented with that. I still think with some of the direction we've been given, this is going to be a modest building. I can't until we define what's in there. A gymnasium space by its very nature takes up a bigger square footage and a piece of ground than, say, meeting rooms and some of the other amenities that we've seen. So it truly is dependent upon the spaces and not only the types of spaces, but the size and configuration of those spaces once we add those in there. We'll be able to give you a much better defined option when we have our next meeting in just terms of general square footage that we're looking at. But we're looking at a pretty, I would say, modest facility at this standpoint.
Well, can you define square footage for that? What is a general, what's modest to you?
Well, again, I think modest is something that's less than what you'd see of the sum of all the amenities that I showed you. I don't think the intention is saying we would build everything, even if everybody said that we wanted all of that. If they would have been red bars all the way across every one of those amenities, I think we would have been saying that might have be tough to be able to accommodate all of that. I think we're trying to find out priorities at this time. Until we really define those spaces, it's really hard because it could swing pretty wildly in terms of that. But we're not, and even the direction we've been given is not an overly large space that would take out. The notion is not to be taking out the whole fields or other options within the park to accommodate this building.
No, and I'm not criticizing you. I'm not trying to say you're just being disingenuous here, but you're asking us to make judgments and asking us to fill out a survey without giving us too many details, as in like no details on square footage. I didn't hear any discussion on price, which I know you're going to default to, well, we don't know what's going to be included, so we can't give a price. But I'm not sure what the value of this is if you can't give us some more concrete idea about what exactly you have in mind.
Well, it's not so much what we have in mind, it's what the community is telling us that they have in mind that'll kind of help define this. I understand your frustration, and we're really in this front end of the process of trying to define what this is. As we move further along with this, we start to define that, and we can respond to those questions as we start to move forward. That says, here's where we are, here's where what we're seeing is potential size of this facility. In the end, and again, that'll be coming before the Board of Supervisors. All those questions will be defined in terms of, here's how the building sits on the site, here's how large it is, here's how much it's going to cost to build, here's how much it's going to cost to operate that. All of those decisions or all that information will have to be available for the township, and the Board of Supervisors can make a decision on moving forward with this project. So that will get to the point through this study where we'll be able to answer those questions. We're just trying to get enough input. And I realize it's a little bit frustrating from your standpoint because there's not much more known about that. Just bear with us through this process. You will see as we move forward, we'll be more about, here's what we heard you say, here's what we think this means, here's what the implications are of this. We'll be giving you things even in the next meeting more to react to that'll start to get through that process. But before it's all said and done, and before, again, the township can authorize moving forward to really the full design phase of this, all of those questions will be answered. So those will be well known in terms of what the impact's going to be on all the things that you've asked about.
Okay.
We have any other hands raised, Megan?
I'm muted, not following my own rule. Thanks, Anne. Next up, we have Dan.
Great, thanks, Megan. So this is Dan Loftus. Thank you, everyone, for your time tonight. It was really, really informative, so appreciate it. I'm a resident of the township. I'm also a volunteer at the Y. So, one of the things that jumped out was a lot of, at least the fitness center conversation. Seems like it is a bit of a duplication of what's offered at the Y. But I think there's definitely a need for maybe some of the community in terms of a meeting center, some other activities. So I think that, you'll see that in your market analysis. But my question is really around, kind of the temporary holding spot for the trailers. It's tough to go by and see the trailers sitting on two big, beautiful basketball courts. Is there an opportunity to move those over the next, 18 months as this is getting figured out to the location that you're thinking about building the building? I
No.
know that would have to get moved back if you wanted to start to build, but any thought about moving those trailers to get some access to those basketball courts?
No, Dan. I can tell you that we can't move them. Those trailers need a substantial foundation, and there was not another substantial foundation. We're going to restore the basketball courts, and we're going to do that tennis court and basketball courts restoration. But for now, those trailers are in place.
That's
There's
the
no other
spot.
place to put them.
Okay.
Stephanie, Stephanie, you have any further on that?
No, Barbara, you are correct. There, and also the use of electric, water, sewer, things like that is at their location, current location.
But I think
Makes sense.
I think the key aspect of this is the intention of this project is to replace those trailers and move those permanently out of there. I think it's just a timing issue of, you know, how long it takes to move this project forward. But I think from the township's perspective, those are going to have to stay there till we can open the doors potentially on a new facility, but then fully intend at that point to move those trailers away. That's really one of the major focuses on this project, is to get out of those trailers.
Okay. Thanks. And thanks again for including us all tonight.
Sure. Any other hands raised? Any other comments in the chat box that we have?
I just posted a comment to see if anyone else is interested in sharing verbally, but I don't see any hand raises. There have been a few comments. I'll have to do a little catch up here. Is there anyone else that would like to share verbally right now? You can just raise your hand or comment in the chat box. Bill, would you like to share?
Yes, please. Thank you. Bill Wirt. The very top of this presentation, there was a timeline presented about how this is going to proceed. Has the board already decided that this is definitely going to happen, and we're just going through the process to see what will be built?
The board has voted to proceed with the construction of a recreation facility. Yes.
Okay, so that's a foregone conclusion. This is just to figure out what's going to get built.
Yes, I think
Okay.
that's a fair comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
There were a few comments just talking again about leasing of spaces, which I think somebody already responded about in the chat, but if there was anything else you would like to add, leasing spaces that are already within the community, or someone also mentioned at Del Valle as well.
Well, I'm at this point, I don't think there's been any real consideration about leasing existing space. Location would be an issue. I think one of the real benefits, even though I think there's been some concerns raised, is actually being able to connect it in with the park and the other amenities that are there, even if they're at the opposite end of that. Generally on when we do any type of community-based facility, we ultimately like to tie it to a park. It really enhances not only the utilization of the park, but also the building itself. So ideally, this is a perfect situation. I understand and fully sympathize with any concerns on impacting and having a real adverse impact potentially on the park. But I think, again, the opportunities are there to really make this work for both the facility and for the park itself. So that's tough when you're putting that into much more of a lease space somewhere else. The other thing is, even with lease space, you don't own that. So you're never anything more than a tenant. And that's a little difficult for townships to work with long-term because they don't control that in long-range improvements and other kind of future aspects of that don't always work out to the best. So as part of that. So at this particular point in the direction that the project team's been given is to look at constructing a building that will be owned and operated by the township in the kind of the corner there of Central Park.
I can also
Can-
make a comment from just the architectural perspective of reutilizing an existing building. If we're talking about a gymnasium space, gyms usually have very high ceilings, and typical commercial buildings don't have those types of ceiling heights that you would have for, sport activities like that. So that would be a difficult, almost impossible space to find, as well as just the expense of fitting out a space like that. As you mentioned, Ken, there's a lot of fit out costs that would be required to be spent in a building that the township wouldn't own. You wouldn't automatically have the bathroom facilities that you need, or the small kitchenette, or whatever it is. So that would be a big expense.
Can I just add something here? When we were losing our recreation building to the refit for our administration expansion, we looked for opportunities to rent, to hold our parks in other places, our parks programs in other places. We looked at existing facilities that were for sale. Could we buy this and refit it? Would that be less expensive than building a new? But just to house our current programs, we looked everywhere we could, and Karen Sweeney, Director of Parks and Rec, can add to this. We looked everywhere we could in the surrounding community where we could host our programs, even on a temporary basis. But we should know that we also looked long-term. Rather than build something new, we looked at whatever could be, repurposed out there for our park and recreation needs. So we did all that exploration, and I appreciate your comments, and I just want to tell you that we did take a look at all of that.
Okay. Do we have any other comments, Megan? Any other hands raised? Any other chat issues we need to know about?
There's no other hand raises that I see at the moment. Just another general comment that seemed to be popping up is a lot of suggestion for space to hold classes and summer camps would be helpful.
Okay, good to know. And that's certainly one of the intents of the project, is to do just that. All right, I think with that, I'll let Barbara kind of close out our meeting. From my standpoint, thank you all very much for your input. This is why we did this. I know it would be probably a lot nicer to have done it in person, but just the times we're in, I hope this format worked for you all, and appreciate you working with us on that. So I'll turn it over to Barbara to close us out.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Sylvia, Megan, and in the background, Ryan. Thank you for putting this together for us. And thank you all for participating. Your comments and your questions are very helpful to us. We are going to use all this internally and as a board and administration, as well as Ken for his feasibility study going forward. But to all of you, thank you for participating. This has been very, very helpful, and we really appreciate all your time and attention tonight. Thank you. Good night. See you in a couple months for part 2.
Thank you all very much.